Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar weekly discussion topic video. This one is going to be a rundown of the 2017 books and merchandise for Avatar and Korra that we're expecting. I'll do a brief kind of 2016 year in review thing at the beginning, but in general that's the topic for this time out. What merchandise is coming out next year for Avatar. So 2016 was, I'd say, a pretty mixed year overall. I think that what we got was good, but I don't think we got a whole lot this year. I think is the main way to explain it. We only got two comics this year, North and South Part 1 and Smoke and Shadow Part 3. So straight away, we didn't get as many books as we kind of really expected. There was, of course, the first Korra comic, Friends for Life, but it was just a free, short comic. And then everything else this year was kind of just the extra stuff, you know, like we got the coloring book, a Korra poster collection, a couple of like statues and stuff like that. Wire released some stuff, but the big stuff at the moment, while there's no animation, is of course the comics, and we didn't get a whole lot of them this year. And I think the biggest comparison between this year and next year is going to be the amount of comics released and the amount of comics expected. So let's jump straight into 2017. Obviously, we are right at the start of North and South. We had Part 1 from this year, and we know the release dates for Part 2 and Part 3. We basically have all of the information we kind of need about Part 2 and Part 3, but obviously we're still like expecting preview pages for Part 2 at this point. So North and South Part 2 is coming out January 25th in comic book stores and February 7th from other bookstores. Here's a look at the cover briefly. So there's that early on in the year. North and South Part 3 is coming out April 26th in comic book stores and May 9th elsewhere. Here's a look at the Part 3 cover. So, and we also do expect the North and South Library Edition hardcover to be released within 2017. It hasn't been announced yet, but just based on like how relatively early in the year North and South is going to finish, I think the hardcover could be out right at the end of the year or else right at the start of 2018. I don't obviously know for sure, but based on how it's worked previous years, the hardcover collection should be out right towards the end of the year. So North and South, we should get the basically rest of the product lineup for that the next year basically. Then we obviously put our attention towards Korra comics. One of the, I suppose, more notable pieces of news in 2016 was that we finally got the full-on official announcement of Legend of Korra Turf Wars. That's going to be the name of the comic series. And so, in 2017, we're going to be getting, for sure, Part 1. Part 1 is going to be released June 7th in comic book stores, June 20th elsewhere. Here's a look at the cover for Part 1. So straight away, that's one of the big things. And then because, you know, it's June when it comes out, if indeed the schedule for the Korra comics is similar to the Avatar comics, we should also be expecting Turf Wars Part 2 to come out in 2017 as well. There's not enough time in the year, I don't think, for all three parts to be released, but for sure Part 2 should be out kind of in or around October, November, I think, based if you kind of use the kind of schedule based off the Avatar comics for the most part, where it's either 3 or 4 months after each previous issue comes out, the next one comes out. So something like that would definitely make sense. And then there is the potential, I don't know if they'll do this, but there is the potential for the next Korra comic series to be announced within 2017. Because moving into the next topic, as well as North and South, we should be getting the announcement relatively early next year about what the next Avatar comic is after North and South. As I said, it's ending in 2017 for sure, but what's coming after that? We don't have any information at the moment about that. Nothing's been said either way, but that's the way it's always been with these comics. They've never like hinted at the next comic series before they've kind of announced it basically. So we're kind of in the same situation as ever, but obviously, does Korra comics being out actually change anything? Like, we don't know for sure what the situation is. Is it Dark Horse's plan to kind of have Avatar and Korra comics coming out consistently at the same time? We don't actually know. but nothing's been said that North and South is the last Avatar comic series, so we just expect and assume it is continuing. And based on previous years, if they are going to announce it, it would make sense that it would be announced in January or February where the next basically what the next Avatar comic series is. Usually it's in or around the release of the second part of a trilogy when they announce what the next series is, and obviously we're getting North and South Part 2 in January, so it makes sense that we get the announcement at some stage in January or February, maybe a little bit later. Which also, I suppose, leaves enough time in the year for the first part of the next Avatar comic series to actually come out within 2017 as well. So we actually are more or less expecting 5 like full-on Avatar comics to come out within 2017 if previous years' kind of scheduling stuff is expected. And I think that makes 2017 like a huge year, in that we are going to get 2 Korra comics potentially, 3 Avatar comics covering 2 different series, the end of North and South and then the start of the next one, and that could be pretty huge. Now obviously the speculation is about what is the next Avatar comic series going to be about. Most people assume, and I think it makes logical sense, for them to return to Azula's story, in that Smoke and Shadow was really good, but ultimately Azula, they kind of moved her story on a decent bit, but it wasn't the resolution we expected, and I think they still need to do a lot with Azula to kind of get her to the point where, the importance of her character has been like covered within the comics. And so I do expect something along those lines, where maybe it's a more Azula focused comic and they're dealing with her, or the only other I think obvious option would be making a big move towards United Republic, Republic City, which has been hinted at in stuff like The Promise, but we haven't quite had like the mention of the idea of calling it United Republic, Republic City, and like really making it a place for all nations. That hasn't happened just yet. We're still in the kind of time period where Yu Dao is just Fire and Earth Nation kind of coming together. So progress needs to be made there. And then of course there has been like talk in, I wouldn't say recent interviews, but previous interviews with Gene Yang, where he's kind of brought up the idea of, time skips and maybe one could happen. And a lot of people are potentially expecting that to happen, just because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for so many things to happen one after the other, that we need a little bit of a break to come back with our characters a little bit older. Maybe some more important stuff can happen because they're older. You can really get the relationships into a point where you're kind of getting them towards the stage where they're getting engaged, getting married, potentially having kids. And that's the sort of stuff that I think the fans really want to see, where you can still tell a plot-focused story about like the formation of Republic City, but you can also have our characters like have their kids or be officially in a relationship, be engaged, be married. And I think that's the sort of stuff we actually want. And so I'd be actually relatively for somewhat of a time skip, because I think with Azula's story the way it is now, I think you could still have a time skip before you approach doing her story again, where you come back maybe a year or 2 later, Azula has been doing stuff behind the scenes to, quote unquote, help Zuko, and they finally decide that this is the time where we have to kind of capture her, to stop her doing what she's doing and really kind of deal with Azula. And then you have her characters in like a different position, and that would be a really cool thing to do. But, that's just obviously speculation right now. We don't know if there is going to be a next Avatar comic. We just assume that that's going to be the case. So there's that. The only other book that has been announced for 2017 that we know for sure is coming is the Legend of Korra coloring book. This was announced at New York Comic Con, and the release date, we don't have like a full release date. We just know it's coming July 2017. So they could absolutely plan this to be released like only a week or 2 after Turf War, so it comes out in early July, but I'm not entirely sure. But here's the cover for that, for anyone wondering. So we obviously got the Avatar book this year. We're getting the Korra coloring book next year, and they're always fun, but they don't really appeal to everyone, of course. So what else is expected in 2017? The rest of the stuff is primarily kind of statues, figures, that sort of thing. So the most obvious one is that Nendoroid Korra from Good Smile Company was announced in 2016. The release date was December, but obviously we're like 10 days away from the end of December, and I haven't heard any word of like Nendoroid Korra shipping, anyone having received it. I think most places you can order Nendoroid Korra from are kind of saying late January is when they expect to get it in and expect people to receive it. So I'm treating Nendoroid Korra as a 2017 release, because I think from basically all but like a couple of people, that's when she's actually going to be released. So for anyone who's unaware of what Nendoroid Korra is, here's a picture. It's kind of a chibified Korra. It's got some articulation, but the main thing with these is that it's like a high-end kind of Japanese company, so there's a lot of accessories with it. You know, you can swap the faces out, put different kind of arm poses and limbs on it, and they're very popular, the Nendoroid line. They cover, you can basically get a Nendoroid of like almost any anime character, basically. It's a really popular line, and so for Korra to get one is actually a really big deal, because if it does well, it kind of potentially leaves it open for more Nendoroid Avatar and Korra figures, or for a good small company to see something in Avatar and Korra, in how successful it is, and potentially make Figma versions of Avatar characters. Now Figma is obviously their more screen accurate, you know, proper articulated figures, not chibified, and I think that's what people really want to see. So that's why people are really hoping that the Nendoroid Korra sells well, so it leaves the potential open for more of that stuff. And I assume because Nendoroid Korra was announced early on in the year, if it is a success, we could see more Nendoroids for Avatar and Korra announced for later on in the year. I think Aang makes sense as the most obvious next one, but I think Zuko or another character like that would also make a ton of sense to do. But other than that, Zwire Industries, obviously we just yesterday had them potentially announce their sepia tone Aang repaint of the Chibi Aang, and obviously there's no way that's being released before the end of the year. So I assume that, if that is in fact a product they're going to sell, will be released in 2017. But we also expect them to announce more Chibi figures, and potentially even another bigger figure that they have. My only speculation on that would be that I assume that they're going to be doing the Chibi figures in pairs, just because they did Korra and Aang to start it off. I think it would make sense to kind of, every time they do a release wave, they do a kind of a Korra figure and an Aang figure, an Avatar figure. And for me, coming up next, on the Avatar side, it would make sense to either do Katara or Zuko next. Zuko seems to be the ones that fans really want, but I think Katara would make sense as well. On the Korra side, I can either see Mako, Bolin, or Tenzin. I think Asami, I can't see them doing her immediately next, unless they really get on the kind of Korra Asami hype train and really just go for like, kind of like the next wave is like the girlfriends of the Avatars kind of wave, and they do Katara and Asami. I think they'll go for the more kind of popular overall characters first, and Asami, I think in general as a character, you wouldn't really consider her one of the most popular characters within the series. So I think that's what they'll do next there. On the bigger statue front, they've seemed to be sticking to Korra, so I'm assuming if they were to make another statue, they'd do that as well. The only other character I can see maybe getting a bigger statue is Mako, Bolin, or Tenzin. I think actually Tenzin could work, just because I think they could do some really cool stuff with effect parts on Tenzin with regards to a big statue. And he is a very popular character, of course, so that would work really well. Outside of that, Zwire announcing some more stuff. Dark Horse themselves have done some statues, some were released in 2016. Will they continue that line or not? I'm not entirely sure. They've been a bit kind of all over the place with regards to like the consistency of their Dark Horse Deluxe line of Avatar stuff. I assume because the Korra comics are coming out, and they seem to treat those like that they're going to be really big, that they'll at least release some sort of other like Korra Avatar merchandise to kind of coincide with that. So I could see them maybe doing some more kind of Korra statues, maybe some Avatar The Last Airbender statues, but at the very least something along those lines, like whether it be a Korra and Asami statue or something like that. I think Dark Horse will put out a few more products throughout the year, but that's obviously just speculation on my part. Nothing has been announced just yet. But I think that more or less covers it. I think the main things, obviously for 2017, to kind of sum it up again, we are expecting much more comics than in 2016. At the very least, we are going to get Turf Wars Part 1, North and South Part 2, and North and South Part 3. So straight away that's more proper comics. While it's disappointing that we won't be getting a 2017 Avatar free comic for 2017, we are in fact replacing that with at least one more official proper Avatar comic. Now, we expect Turf Wars Part 2 to come out in 2017, and also potentially the first part and announcement of the next Avatar series. So that could be up to 5 Avatar books released in a year, plus all that supplementary stuff like the coloring book, Nendoroid Korra, and some of the other kind of statues, action figure type stuff. Plus maybe more. So I think 2017 looks to be probably the best year of Avatar since Korra came to an end. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on 2017. How it's looking in terms of the product lineup, what you think we will see, what we may not see, or whatever, and the speculation that I've given. And also, I suppose, what would be your kind of dream Avatar merchandise release for 2017? Take all logic and reason out of the situation and just say, what do you really want Avatar to do in 2017 to make it a really good year? But yeah, I'll just end by saying links to my Twitter and Tumblr if you want to follow me on social media are in the description, as well as my Patreon campaign and also my PayPal donation link if you want to help support my channel. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.